good to see everybody. I want to get right into the message this morning, if that's okay. No fancy introductions in a sense. For those who may not know, my father passed back in August of 2018. This could have been last week's message, but I decided the Lord felt the green light for today. I can't believe it's already been about 3 years. For those who've come to the assembly since Ken Foley's departure to heaven, I would say he was quite a guy. I was a rather big fan for the 42, 43 years of my life and living. And since his passing, I've taken the time to periodically visit the cemetery where he's buried in West Boylston. Nothing creepy in terms of all the time, probably once every month or two, almost always with my mother. And Lord willing, she's tuning in today. Betty Foley, AKA Mom, we're praying for your ankle this morning. She's had a broken ankle for 2 to 3 years. Surgery keeps getting postponed. So do keep her in prayer. She's really starting to languish in what she's able to do and beyond. But she and I will go quite often to the gravesite, mainly to see how the grounds are doing. I don't go to talk with my father or commune with him in any way. I know where he is. He's in heaven, so when I go to the gravesite, his earthly corpse is there, but where he is with the Lord in heaven. But I'll go again to investigate the grounds and spend some time with my mom. And over the course of about the 2 or 3 years, I would say a series of lessons have been reaffirmed in my heart, and I've come to see, and this is going to sound odd, there's actually a lot to learn in a cemetery. I know it sounds a little morbid, but it's true. And this morning I want to share probably 6 or 7 things that over the course of the 2 or 3 years, they resonate with me. And I'm hoping that as things kind of fill and speak to my heart, that you would enjoy the overflow. So if you're a note taker, Lord bless you, there's going to be a lot of notes today. I would recommend just downloading the notes on Tuesday or Wednesday. That way you can be as present as you can during the sermon and attentive. Lesson number 1. And again, this is just the value or the lesson I've learned in going to a cemetery. You ready for number 1? There really is value in both stillness and quiet. If there are 2 words that I would use to describe a cemetery, still and quiet are likely 2 of the best that I could offer. I would say that there's a dead silence at the cemetery, but the pun may be a little too obvious. When you pull into a cemetery, you are guaranteed just about to be the loudest one there. And I've come to discover personally the benefit of tranquil, calm environments, especially where the setting has a natural beauty to it, which many cemeteries do. In a world of incessant, unceasing white noise and soul-numbing distraction, there really is something helpful about retreating into a serene place to practice the art of stillness. Can I just say, as all eyes turn this way, we are not good at stillness or silence. If I was to take 10 seconds right now and say nothing, people would begin to get a little like, I hope everything is okay. I think of our forefathers who didn't have TV, before there was radio, before there was internet and social media and Twitter and cell phones that are now tethered to our bodies. We're basically androids, by the way. We have machinery just about tethered to our body 24/7. I think of the world that they lived in, how quiet it must have been. And you want to know why I believe that many old authors and older generations, they were a bit more insightful, I would say. They were certainly better writers. If you read any book prior to 1920, better writers. If you don't believe me, go back and read some founding documents. We are so advanced we can barely read them. Because they were a contemplative, reflective people, and they knew the value of being quiet. We do not do quiet well. I want to ask you a few questions rhetorically. Don't answer, but I want you to process this a little bit. When was the last time that you were still before the Lord? When was the last time that you allowed yourself a moment of silence, or that you knew a moment of calm, tranquil serenity? Now, the Bible actually has quite a bit to say about being still. Be still, it says, and know that I am God. There really is something about just waiting quietly before him. Now, the Bible establishes, and I'm not going to preach a whole sermon on this point, though we could, Jesus himself often retreated away from the crowds to reconnect with his heavenly Father. Let me give you a couple of Bible verses. Don't turn there because they're too short. Mark 1, verse 35, very early in the morning. By the way, if you read it in context, this follows an incredibly busy season of ministry. Jesus on the go, Jesus healing, Jesus casting out demons, Jesus preaching and beyond. And it says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. It says in Luke 5, really as his work and his ministry were really beginning to abound, it says news about him spread, and crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But it says in Luke 5, verse 16, Jesus often, that's the key word here because it was a regular thing, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. If your world is always go, 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 and it never stops and you never get a break, and if the snapping is irritating, that's deliberate, and you never get a moment just to be still, I want to say we're missing something. And we're missing something deep in terms of Christianity. I would put forth that if it was the will of the Father to conform us into the image of Jesus, and it is, per Romans 8, maybe we should aspire to his example. And maybe now and then, pull away, find a quiet place, and be still. Point number 2. The cemetery forces me to recognize the reality of mortality. And I will say the older that I get, and I am still relatively young, the more I am confronted by the mortality of humanity. When I was 15, 20, I thought I would live forever. Can anybody relate to that? When you're young and you don't know what you don't know yet, you just assume you'll go on forever. And then I want to say it was about in the 30s, early 30s. I'm 42, almost 43 now. My birthday's next week, July 4th, by the way. 43 years young. I began to lose people. Not like where'd they go, but they died. Relatives, friends. I was a part of a large assembly. It felt like every week someone that I knew passed. And as I get older, I find it happening a bit more often. Or maybe I'm just aware of it a bit more so now. The Bible, even if we're uncomfortable with it, continually addresses the brevity of life. This thing is short. And I will say at 42, almost 43, I swear it's going faster, week by week, and month by month, and year by year. My father always said when he was alive, the older you get, the faster it seems to go. And once again, the old man had some wisdom. And I'm only about halfway home mathematically. So we shall see if the rest proves to be true. The Bible says, what is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. The psalmist said the following, Psalm 39, you've made my days a mere handbreadth. The span of my years is nothing before you. Everyone is but a breath. Yes, that also includes you, even those who seem so secure. One more time, Psalm 144, Lord, what are human beings that you care for them? Mere mortals that you think of them. They are like a breath, and their days are like a fleeting shadow. C.H. Spurgeon, Charles Haddon Spurgeon, is considered to be one of the greatest preachers of all time and a tremendous writer. Here was his commentary on the matter. Here is the history of grass. It's sown, it's grown, it's blown, it's mown, and then it's gone. And the history of mankind is not much more. That's a pretty good picture for how our lives are. Grass withers, flowers fade. There's only one who lasts forever. And I found that recognizing my mortality, visiting a gravesite, hasn't caused me to turn morbid and nihilistic. It's actually caused me to sharpen my life a little bit in terms of the diligence that I have using the time that I have been given. There's a rapper named Lecrae, maybe the younger people know of him, but this is what he says. Even in our best shape, we are but a brittle piece of mortality. Your life is but a breath. Don't waste it. Which echoes what Jesus taught. As long as it's day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming, speaking of death, when no one can work. The Bible says, the Apostle Paul to the Ephesians, be very careful then how you live, not as the unwise, but as the wise. Make the most of every opportunity. Why? Because the days are evil. Therefore, don't be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. I want you to go to Psalm 90. I want to look at a bit of an extended passage before we move on to point number 3. And I know that this is not advanced level Christianity. This is not something you've never heard before. But I think it's important to realize that we are all very mortal and have a finite span of time. And we are called to use it wisely. Psalm 90. I'm going to pick it up in verse 3. I don't want to read the entire thing. Psalm 90, verse 3, it says, you turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. Which harkens back to the garden after the fall. Verse 4, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. Yet you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like the new grass in the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but by evening it is dry and withered. Verse 12, this is the conclusion in a sense, or the prayer of the psalmist. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. This is a harder lesson for the younger people to receive. I will cede that point. The idea of the fact you won't live to get forever, it does seem foreign. As I often jokingly say, I can't imagine a world without me, because as far as I know, the world has always had me in it. Prior to 1978, I don't know what was going on. And by 2078, when I'm likely dust myself, should the Lord tarry, it will continue on. I have but a finite span, as do you. Use it wisely, because once time is lost, it really is gone forever. Point number 3, moving quickly. The cemetery reminds me that there is a certain equity in death, and I'm being deliberate with that word. I think, by the way, it's a side note, rabbit's trail, I think that Christians should study the times in which they live. We should understand the happenings of the age in a sense that we might speak to it and influence it. And equity has now become the buzzword. If you notice, it's not equality anymore, it's equity. And those two things are very different. If equality is equality of opportunity, equity is equality of outcome, same outcome. And when you go to the graveyard, one of the things that you do realize is that there is a certain equity in death, because everybody does die. I put forth before you that the people buried in my dad's cemetery, in every cemetery, I am sure, had many things that differentiated them. Gender, race, how much cash they had in the bank account, how many assets they had, what their political leanings were, what their hobbies and interests were, talents, capacities, personal dreams, desires, aspirations, and more. But one thing connects them all. They all died. And the same is true of us today. I look around a room full of relative handful of people compared to the 7 billion with a B and growing on the earth. There are many things that do differentiate the living. Same things, race, gender, how much cash you have in the bank, skills, talents, abilities, personal dreams, aspirations, and beyond. But I promise you, we all have one thing in common. At least one thing. We will all die. All of the varied paths of life and living ultimately and inevitably converge in death. Aren't you happy you came to church today? That's what the Bible says, Ecclesiastes 9. All share a common destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. No one knows when their hour will come. And it will come. And it seems to me, and it's biblical, and it's based upon personal experience as well, death is by no means a respecter of persons. I'm not great at mathematics. I look around the room at people that are engineers and beyond, and my mind just boggles at the things you understand. And some of your conversations, I love to just eavesdrop and wish I knew what you were talking about, but I digress. But I can add and subtract. I can do at least that. And during my visits to the cemeteries, occasionally my mother and I will begin to do a little bit of math, and this is a bit morbid, but it does happen. How old were people when they died? 1920 minus 1898, 1960 versus 1905. And you want to know what I found to be true? Not everybody lives to be a ripe old age. I can't tell you in my visits to the cemetery once every couple of months how often we'll go by a gravestone that will say something along the lines of born January 1901, died November 1901. Death does come for us all, but we never know when. That's the trick of it. And the reality is death does take older people. I won't say old. It does take middle-aged people. And it even takes kids. I look over the past year, and I don't want to linger too long on this because I know that the emotions are still tender, but I can think of at least 3 people that died what I would consider to be untimely deaths. In other words, when a 95-year-old passes, not to be rude to those with elders or who might be that age, but there's something where when a person is a certain age, you do begin to expect it a little bit. But I think over the past year, I never expected Michael Watson to pass away. I never expected that phone call. If you had asked me in January, 52 years old, 53, in that ballpark, Scott Long, just a month or so after, I would say, in a sense, the most brutal wake-up call was little Charlie. And Lord willing, the Picketts will be here today because they want to spend some time and vice versa. Had you told me in January that we would lose those 3, I wouldn't have bought it. What we see is the reality that death is no respecter of persons. Therefore, the only way to really live this life is in a perpetual state of trust, number 1. I love this quote by John Owen, who I believe offhand was an old Puritan writer and preacher. We cannot enjoy peace in this world unless we are ready to yield to the will of God in respect to death. Our times are in His hand at His sovereign disposal, and we must accept that as best. We have to be faithful to the Lord and trusting in Him, and ultimately, number 2, ready. There's a good quote that I like. I don't have the author in front of me. When it's your time to die, be sure that it's all you have to do. When it's your time to die, be sure that it is all you have to do. I like this quote by Augustine, old ancient church father. They then who were destined to die, that's all of us, need not be careful to inquire what death they are to die. In other words, don't spend all your time wondering how you're going to check out of this life. But the thing we should be considering is into what place death will usher us. Because as we're going to see in point number 4, if there is a certain equity in death, there is no equity in the afterlife. And what I mean is that not everybody goes to the same place. Biblically speaking, and I know that as time goes on and our culture turns more godless, this is going to become a more and more unpopular point, and I expect no fanfare for saying it. But the Bible, the Word of God, does differentiate and present a distinction between the fate of the righteous and the wicked. There is a difference between heaven and hell. And everyone on the sound of my voice, please make sure you know where your ticket is punched in terms of where you're going to go. Not based on how well you can behave or keep a checklist, but how faithful you can be to trusting in Christ. I want to show you a series of verses, if that's okay. Some I'll read to you, some I'll just have you turn to. I'll read this one to you. Jesus himself said, everyone say, Jesus said. Last I checked, a pretty good authority for all things Christian. Enter through the narrow gate. And he continues in terms of why. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Can I encourage you to be one of the few and not just follow the masses that like lemmings are rushing headlong unto hell? Go to Matthew 25. I'm going to take my time with this. These points are worth underscoring. And if you're a believer who already knows where you're going and your ticket proverbially is punched, these are texts that should compel you, as we're going to see in a few moments, to spread the word to those who do not know where they're going. Matthew 25, I don't have time to read the entire thing, but if you skip down to verse 34, this picks up in the account of the sheep and the goats. There's this picture of Jesus coming, he's ruling and reigning, and he separates the nations unto two distinct groups, sheep and goats. Verse 34, the king, this is Christ, will say to those on his right, and this is the group of the righteous, the sheep, if you will. Come, he says, there's this wonderful invitation. You who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. And then he continues on regarding the type of people that they were, a selflessness and a sacrifice based upon faith. Skip down now to verse 41, because we're going to see a very different situation for those on the left. Then the king will say to those on his left, depart from me. Not those who are blessed, but you who are cursed. And help the pastor out. Into what? Where is their end? What is their fate? What's the trajectory? Where does it lead them? Into the, I didn't write this. This is not me, as some would say, the creation of clergymen to keep populations under control. This is Jesus saying it. God the Son, human flesh, who knows everything about everything. And he says, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels, which indicates ultimately hell wasn't prepared for people. That was essentially the plan B when people chose to depart. We were prepared originally for the kingdom, to be his, to be blessed, to know eternal life. But because people reject that, God will respect their desires and give them what they ask for. So they will end up where the devil and his angels were. Skip down to verse 46, which is this tremendous summary regarding the two disparate paths of the righteous and the wicked. There will be those, the goats, who will go away into eternal, help me out, punishment. But the righteous to eternal life. Now, there may be some who will say or try to convince you that hell is only a temporary thing, whereas heaven is eternal. Look at the passage. Hell and heaven will endure for how long? Forever. I can keep going. We can look at Luke chapter 16. I won't have you turn there, but it talks about a rich man and Lazarus. Likely not a parable, but an actual account that Jesus, as the pre-incarnate God the Son, witnessed himself. And I say it likely wasn't a parable because in this account, Jesus does something he never does. In any other parable, he uses a formal, proper name. He names a character. Likely the rich man is still in this place of torment, whereas Lazarus is still in a place of paradise. And what we see is the rich man was in torment, in agony, and you want to know the sad tragedy of what we see in Luke 16? That is still where he is. This account was penned thousands of years ago. And if that account is true, based upon a reality, that guy's still there. Hopefully he wasn't joined by his family. And if you read the account, you'll see why I say that. Once again, those who are destined to die, don't be careful to inquire what kind of death you're going to die, but into what place death will usher you. Because there is equity in death, sameness of end, but there really is no equity in the afterlife. You will end up in one of two very distinct and different places. Point number 5, moving quickly. The cemetery reminds me that it's better to have Jesus in your heart and life than on your tombstone. It never ceases to amaze me how when everyone dies, they suddenly become a deified saint. Most gravestones are incredibly Christianized. Nearly all of them have a cross, some religious imagery, some Bible passage, some icon, some declaration of hope or profession of faith and beyond. I'm going to say something hard, but it's true. When I'm at the cemetery and I see every tombstone having some kind of Jesus decor, I genuinely wonder how many are with him. Not because of how wonderful I am or who I am as a judge. I'm not a judge at all. I have no say regarding who goes to hell or heaven. But Jesus himself said it would seem that many do choose to go to the wrong place, and only a few find the path that leads to life. You need to hear me clearly, especially I would say the older generations that tend to place a lot of faith in their religiosity. God does not judge us by the profession of faith that we put on our tombstone, but the faith that we possessed and or reject in this life. This principle is comparable to how many people will wear a cross around their neck, but they refuse to carry the one that Jesus has called them to carry in life. The Lord himself has never placed value in religiosity or sacred observance, but in faith-filled, sincere devotion. For homework, because the text is too long, read on your own or download my notes and read the book of Isaiah chapter 1, specifically around the verse 10 to 20 area. And what you see is the Lord calling out a people that by every metric looked religious. They said the right stuff. They wore the right attire. They knew how to worship their hands. They knew how to offer the sacrifices. They knew how to keep the holidays that they were commanded to keep. And the Lord said, stop. I can't deal with it anymore. I don't want any more sacrifices. I don't want any more observances. All I want is you. Tragically, the people didn't listen, and they went off unto judgment, both in this life and the life to come. Can I say, let's not replicate their failings. We're going to look next week a little bit for the 4th of July. By the way, there's going to be church on the 4th of July. I think it's kind of funny that we're going to value the Lord's gift of freedom so much that we're going to practice the gift not to come to church. I digress. We'll have church. And one of the things I want to talk about is a series of quotes from our founding fathers and beyond that doesn't reveal that they themselves were believers. Because the Christian background of a lot of our forefathers, it is tough to discern. But they will show that they were greatly influenced by biblical teaching, at least to a degree. And often they would talk about the fate of the nation that rejects the Lord. And then the week after, I want to look a little bit regarding at the fall of Rome. There are 5 reasons, according to historians, why Rome fell. Gang, we're awfully close. And a lot of them have to do with the rejection of the Lord and biblical teaching. So as our nation is wayward, and I would say worsening, we are playing with fire, and I think that we as believers need to come to understand where we really are. Point number 6, almost done. All of these lessons in total should compel us to reach as many as we can. In light of the brevity of life, the certainty of death, and the reality of the afterlife and beyond, we should be a people who take the standing order of Jesus seriously. Jesus came to his own and said, post-resurrection, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, teaching them, and beyond. Surely I am with you always as you do this work until I come back to the very end of the age. Mark 16, Jesus said to them, same setting and so forth, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. And then he spells it out. Those who believe, they'll be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. The end result of where people end up and what they choose is not on you. It's on them. But it is on you to tell and to share and to proclaim and to model a life that makes Jesus appealing and attractive to those who know nothing about him. I like this quote by theologian J.C. Ryle, a converted man doesn't want to go to heaven alone. Final point, I will end with this, that's not a pastoral lie. The cemetery has taught me to appreciate the living while I can and while they're here. There's something rather final about death, it would seem. When you go to the cemetery, you can't commune, speak to, or share life with the dead, which makes death awfully hard. Therefore, if there's to be any communion, any conversation, any meaningful sharing and beyond, it must happen in this life and in the here and now. When my grandmother died many years ago, my uncle, my mom's brother, shared the following poem. And it stuck with me for years, and I want to end with this. If you're ever going to love me now while I can know. All the sweet and tender feelings which from real affection flow. Love me now while I'm living, don't wait till I'm gone. And then chisel it in marble, warm words on ice-cold stone. If you have dear, sweet thoughts about me, why not whisper them to me? Don't you know it would make me happy and as glad could be? If you wait till I'm sleeping, never to awaken again, there will be walls of earth between us, and I can't hear you then. If you knew someone was thirsting for a drop of water sweet, would you be so slow to bring it? Would you step with laggard feet? There are tender hearts all around us, thirsting for our love. Why withhold from them what nature makes them crave, all else above? I won't need your kind caresses when the grass grows over my face. I won't crave your love or kisses in my last low resting place. And it concludes with this. So then if you love me any, if it's just a little bit, let me know while I'm living so that I can own and treasure it. If you have loved ones, if you have friends, if you have people in your orbit that mean something to you, you want to know when the time to let them know is while you can. Don't wait. Don't put it off. And I'll add this. If you have enmity, animosity, issues, relational divides, do everything that you can to fix it, because I have been in the presence of people who have died. As a minister, I'm around death when it happens a lot. And I'll never forget one case. Of course, I'll keep it nameless, but the person died, and the daughter looked at me and said, there was so much left to say. Don't be that person. Don't wait. Let's close in prayer before I give a few announcements. Father, we come before you this morning, and this is a sobering topic. I get that. It's not a fun topic. It's not one that anyone's liable to amen. But these truths, Lord, matter, because it's one of the things that gives us perspective, to recognize that our time is short and that we are called to be good stewards of the time that we have, to make sure that we know you, that we're ready to see you when the inevitable happens, and to try to win as many as we can to experience life with you in the here and in the eternal ages to come. Use us, God. Speak to us. Whatever lessons have gone forth from this place that are resonating in human hearts, here or at home or well after this recording is done and is listened to, God, draw us to you. Let this be the day of salvation. Let this be a moment for people to look to you. Lord, as for me and my house, we serve you. May that be the same in all of our cases and beyond. We thank you for this time to come together. As we go our separate ways, Lord, perhaps I pray you'd bless us. For those who will remain for the food, I pray you'd bless the food, make it nourishing to our body, bless the conversations around the table. We do thank you for this time in the name of Jesus Christ. Lord willing, everyone says amen.